Welcome everyone to Lingua Latīna tutorials with Mr. K, Pensum D. This video explains the new grammar and syntax found in chapter 13 of the Lingua Latīna per se Illustrāta series. It is meant to accompany the Latine Disco text available from Focus Bookstore and the Pensum D worksheet available from 50%latin.blogspot.com or christianlanguage.com. So let's get right into the text and look at the new grammar and syntax. We're going to start in line 2, where we have Januarius mensis primus. Okay, January, the first month. What I want to point out here is that all of the months of the year are actually adjectives. So Januarius is not a noun, it's an us ending adjective, so when you put it with mensis it would be January's month. And if you put it together with calendai, which we learn later in this chapter, which is feminine plural, then this becomes calendai Januarii. So the ending of January will change to match the noun that it's with. And so you should understand all of these months as January's month, February's month. And even though in context here we're going to, without the noun with it, you can read it as a substantive adjective. So Januarius on its own can be translated just as January. So the next feature throughout this section here, lines 2 through 6, we see Februarius, Secundus, Martius, Tertius, Aprilis, Quartus, Maius Quintus, Junius Sextus, Julius Septimus, Augustus Octavus, September Nonus, October Decimus, November Undecimus, December mensis duodecimus, ac prostremus. So what we have here are several months that are in the first and second declension, like Januarius, Februarius, Martius, the ones with us endings, skip Aprilis, then Maius, Junius, Julius, Augustus. Those are all first and second declension adjectives, so the us adjectives. The months that are third declension adjectives, which would decline like brevis, are Aprilis, and then also September Septembris, October Octobris, November Novembris, December Decembris. So those months will decline like brevis. So when you match them up with their nouns, well, we'll need to remember that. You'll see that later in this chapter. That they get the third declension endings. In the same section, we see these 3 months of September, October, November, December, which look similar to numbers we've already seen, septem, octo, noem, and decem, but we see that they're not linked up with the right numbers. So September, which is 7, is not the 7th month, but the 9th month. And even though they are derived from the numbers you'd expect, they don't link up because in the old Roman calendar, the ancient Roman calendar, Martius started the month. So if you count from March, then September does become the 7th month, October the 8th, November the 9th, and December the 10th months, which explains the derivation of those numbers. The months are explained here with more ordinal numbers. Remember, ordinal numbers are the ones that tell us the order of things. So we've already learned primus, secundus, tertius, quartus, and then now we see the 5th through the 12th. Quintus, sextus, septimus, octavus, nonus, decimus, undecimus, and duodecimus. These are adjectives as well, us adjectives, so first and second declension adjectives, and they will match the noun that they go with. The next feature in the text, new grammar and syntax, is in line number 7. Here we have unus annus duodecim menses vel trecentos sexaginta quinque dies habet. So 1 year has 12 months, or in other words, 365 days. So here we see the word vel, okay, which means the same thing as out in our translation. We'd still translate this as or, but it has a different sense. you use, well actually comes from welle, which means to want. So a way to translate this is, or if you will. It's another way of saying, like, in other words, or if you please. So 1 year has 12 months, or if you will. Explaining further as another option here, 365 days. Compare that with the use of out in line 28, where we see, where is it here? Right, here we go. Duo te treginta aut unde treginta dies tantum habet. So February is shorter. It has 28 or 29 days only. So these are not, you can't say like 28 or if you will. It's not another way of explaining 28. It's 29. These are exclusive options. It's one or the other. So that's the difference between well and out. Out gives you one or the other option. Well gives you an alternative, an acceptable alternative. So let's go back now into line 22 for our next feature, where we have nunc autem mensis primus est Januarius, september egetur mensis nonus est, etc. And I want to point out that verbs here, we're going to start to learn some new tenses of verbs in new tenses of verbs in this chapter. So we're going to learn all the features of a verb, and there are only 5 characteristics of a verb that you need to identify it fully, and that those are person, number, tense, mood, and voice. So for example, person and number for est, this is third person singular from sum, and so if you were going to conjugate sum, you'd have sum es est as first, second, and third person singular, est being the third singular, and then plural sumus estis sunt, first, second, and third person plural. So here we have a third person singular verb, but that's not enough to explain it fully. We need to know the tense, the mood, and the voice to know this verb fully. The tenses that we've learned so far, we've only learned the present tense. Things have only been happening right now. So est is present tense. And then the mood, we only have 4 moods. In Latin, you've learned the indicative mood, which is just your standard way of indicating things in the world that are true, factual things. And then you've also seen the imperative mood, the commanding mood, where you say something with commanding emotional quality in your voice. And you've seen the infinitive, which has no person and number, and you translate with to, to, in front of the verb. And the infinitive of this, est, would be esse, to be. The voice, we've learned active and passive voice, and so here we have the active voice. So to fully explain this verb, you'd have third person singular, present, active, indicative for est. Now compare that with the verb in line 19 and 22. Here we have tempora antiquo Martius mensis primus erat, and then in line 21 erant. So in tempora antiquo, in ancient time, in the old days, March was the first month. So if I were going to give the full form of erat, it would, like est, be third person singular, but it would not be present. Here is our first past tense that we're learning. It is called the imperfect tense. Imperfect, not completed tense. So third person singular, imperfect. It is also active and indicative, and that would fully explain the form of this verb here. For line 21, where we have errant, so December, so these guys, October, November, December, were the 8th, 9th, and 10th months. Were third person, plural, rather than singular, imperfect, active, indicative. Everything else is the same. The only thing that is different here between erat and errant is singular and plural. Singular for erat, errant is plural. Okay, the next feature I want to point out is in line 30, where we have is mensis anni brevissimus est. This month is the shortest of the year. Brevissimus is what we call a superlative adjective. Superlative, think of the word super being very extreme or very high, very much. And that's what superlatives are. They often end in issimus or imus, and they tell you either it can be translated as very or the most. So this is very short. This month is the very short one of the year, but here in this context it actually does mean the shortest, est on the end, which indicates the superlative. Compare that, brevissimus, with brevior, shorter. This is the comparative, this is the superlative. The other form of this adjective is what we call the positive form. Positive of brevior is brevis. Brevis, short. Brevior, comparative, shorter. Brevissimus, superlative, the shortest. These forms you're going to see throughout this chapter in different ways, and you'll see them further in the next chapter. The next feature that I want to point out is in line 33, and that is the way that the Romans would say 1/2, 1/3, 1/4, etc. So we have 6 menses sunt dimidia pars anni, 3 menses quarta pars anni. So 6 months are dimidia pars, 1/2 of the year. 3 months are 1/4 part of the year. So if you wanted to say 1/3 part of the year, you could probably already guess you're going to use the ordinal number matched up with pars. So the third, you'd have a third part for 1/3, tertia pars, and 1/5 would be quinta pars, etc. The next feature is in line 35, where we have dies est dum sol in caelo est, prima pars die est mane. So a day, it is a day while the sun is in the sky. It is day while the sun is. So dies, we see in the margin, is our last, the last declension of nouns that we're going to see. It's the 5th declension. It is most of the time feminine, but here, dies, we see our one exception. So don't let that throw you off and make you think that the 5th declension is going to have many masculines. It doesn't. It is all feminine except for dies. So, and we see here the genitive form of dies, diei. So the first part of the day, this is our partitive genitive again. The first part of the day is the morning, mane. So the full declension of dies is at the end of this chapter, and it would be dies, diem, diei, die, and the plural dies, dies, dierum, diebus, diebus. So the next feature, I've already read it here with mane, is that we have a noun here, mane, which means in the morning, or morning, that is indeclinable. Indeclinable, so you see in the margin there's no genitive with it. It is one of those rare nouns in Latin that has no endings. So in the morning, before the morning, during the morning, any form of morning that you can anticipate that would have a different case is still going to be mane. And so we call this mane word indeclinable, and you'll meet a few others. There aren't many, but you'll meet a few others before you finish Familia Romana. The next feature is in line 52. So go ahead to 52. And we see cum exigua pars luna tantum videtur, luna nova esse dicitur. So when a small part of the moon is seen, only a small part of the moon is seen, the moon is said to be nova, is said to be new. I want to take that line and compare it with the way the Romans would say, they say that the moon is new. So here we have a nominative with dicitur esse. It is said to be. It is said to be this thing, and we get a kind of a predicate nominative of sorts here where we stay in the nominative case after the infinitive. It is said to be new. However, if we were going to use the active form of dicatur, say, he says that the moon is new, then we would go into the accusative infinitive construction. Dicit lunam novum esse. He says that the moon is new. So I just want to point out that you can have with the passive of dicatur is said to be, and you could have the nominative form afterward, as opposed to the infinitive, accusative infinitive construction with just the active dicit. The next feature I want to point out is in line 54, where we have die quinto decimo post lunam novum luna plena est et formam habet litterae. Oh, okay. So on here we have on the 15th day after the new moon, the moon is the full moon. The moon is full and has the form or shape of the letter O. So die here is an ablative, die quinto decimo. All of this is in the ablative case. There's no preposition with it, so we have to give it a special name. The name for this construction, when you say like on the 15th day, the way the Romans would describe time as an on a specific, at a specific time, on this day, they used the ablative, what we call the ablative of time. So the reason that this is in the ablative, we would say, is because it is expressing the time is the ablative of time on the 15th day. The next feature is in line 57, where we have dies mensis primus calendae nominatur. The which is the first day of the month is called calendae, is called the calends. So the name the Romans gave to the first day is the calends, in English just spelled out as K-A-L-E-N-D-S. From that word we do get our word calendar, and it's a Greek word. The Greeks did not have calends. There's actually a phrase in Latin, ad calendas Graecas, which meant basically till hell freezes over, or never, because there's no Greek calends. So the first month is called the calends. First of the day of the month is called the calends, and notice that it is nominative. It's plural. You see in the margin that it's feminine plural. It's one of those plural only words. And in the next line we see that if you want to say the 1st of January, you would say calendae Januarii, January's calends. The next feature I want to show is the Romans, besides naming the first day of the month, they named two other important days. The one in line 62, here we see dies tertius decimus post calendas idus nominatur. So the 13th day after the calends is called the Ides. That's only in the month of January. There are other months where the Ides fall on the 15th day, and we're going to learn that in just a minute. But in the month of January, the calends is on the 1st. That's always true for every month. The calends is on the 1st. The Ides, it depends on the month, but in January it's the 13th. Most months it's the 13th. And the next, and notice also that that is feminine plural, idus iduum, so it's from the 4th declension. It's nice to know that all the names of the special days are feminine. It helps to remember them, feminine plural for all of them, even though they're not all the same declension. The next feature is in line 69. And so we gotta go to the next page, and we have ante dius dicitur nonae. So the other day that is important to the Romans in the calendar, the named day, is the nouns, N-O-N-E-S. So Ides spelled out I-D-E-S, nouns, N-O-N-E-S. And so the dies, here we have the full sentence, dies nonus ante idus dicitur nonae. So the 9th day before the Ides is called the nouns, and you can tell that nouns comes from nonus, the 9th. And that's the 9th day by Roman reckoning, which includes both days, the day you're counting from and the day you're counting to. That's how they would count nine days. So we have 3 important days in the month. The first is the calends, the 13th or 15th, which is the Ides, and the 5th or the 7th, which is the nouns. And the months that have the ides on the 15th day and the nouns on the 7th, you can remember them by a little poem, which goes like this. In March, July, October, May, the ides fall on the 15th day, the nouns the 7th, but all besides have 2 less days for nouns and ides. Less should be, grammatically should be fewer in that sentence, but it wrecks our rhythm, so we will let it go and keep our poem with less. So March, July, October, May, those are the special months that have the ides on the 15th, and that's important especially because we know that Julius Caesar was murdered on the ides of March, and that was the 15th of that month because the ides fall on 15th day. If he were murdered on the ides of June, it would have been the 13th day rather than the 15th. So now I want to look at line 73, where we see the odd construction the Romans used to describe a day of the month. Whereas we say, if we're going to point out any day of the month, we say the 1st of January, the 2nd of January, the 3rd of January, the 4th of January. We just count with ordinal numbers through the month. Quite a simple system. The Romans had a very complicated system, and they always counted either the special day itself, either the calends, the ides, or the nouns, calends, nouns, and ides, or they counted until the days until. If you weren't on one of those 3 special days, you were always counting to the next one. They were always looking forward to their next special moment. And so here we see dies octavus ante calendas Januarias, qui dicitur ante diem octavum calendas Januarias est dies anni brevissimus. So the 8th day before the calendars of January, which is called, and here's the way the Romans didn't say dies octavus ante calendas Januarias, which would make sense, the 8th day before the calendars of January. They said, everything in the accusative here, they said ante diem octavum calendas Januarias. Literally, before the 8th day, before January's calends. And but that's the way they did it, so we have to learn that structure. And you see in the margin how they abbreviated that as AD, and then the Roman numeral for the 8th, and then calendas Januarias abbreviated as Cal Yule, or no, here, sorry, this is Yule instead of Januarias, but it would be same thing, except it would be Jan here if we were giving this date. So and the rest of that sentence is the shortest day of the year. That's how that sentence ends. So now we're going to look at the way the Romans said a variety of dates. So looking at line, we're going to show you how they said January 1st, January 13th, January 5th and January 13th, the calends, the nouns, and the ides. So in line 58, we see how they said January 1st, calendae Januarii. And in line 63, we see how they said the ides of January. This is how they would say January 13th, idus Januarii. Again, January's ides. Notice the endings, quite different, but they do match, because idus is 4th declension, nominative plural here, and Januarii, and it's feminine, right? So Januarii is nominative plural feminine as well. So January's ides, idus Januarii. And then the way to say January 5th, which happens to be the nouns of January, is in line 69. And we see here that it is nonai Januarii. So that's how you'd say January 1st, January 5th, and January 13th. You wouldn't say primus Januarius or something like that. The next feature that I want to point out is in line 66, and that is how you would say in the month of March or in the month of October. You would use the ablative of time, just like we saw earlier, and you'll see this here in look at lines 65 to 66. Sed idus Martiae dies est quintus decimus mensis Martii Nam mense martio, etc. idus non dies tertius decimus. Sed quintus decimus post calendas est. Okay, long sentence, but it says, but the Ides of March is the 15th day of March for, and then we have mense martio, in the month of March. Ablative singular for both of these, right? So mensis is a masculine noun. So in the month of March, mense martio, in March's month, likewise in May and in July and in October, the Ides is not on the 13th day, but on the 15th day after the calends. So the other feature is, notice how Octobri has a different ending here, right? Octobri, in the month, mense Octobri, in the month of October. Why does it have this long I on the end? It's because, as you saw earlier, I mentioned earlier, October is one of those months that is third declension. It's a third declension adjective, and therefore the ablative singular is going to have this long E, just like brewis. If you're going to say in a short month, it would be mense brewi, and if you're going to say in the month of October, in October's month, you'd say mense octobri. Okay, so the last new feature that we're going to look at, we're going to skip all the way ahead to line 140, and here we see that Aemilia puerum dormire velle putat. Aemilia thinks, putat, same as cogitat, thinks that the boy velle dormire, wants to sleep. Velle is an infinitive from vult. You see here in the margin, it says vult, volunt. He wants, they want. The infinitive, to want, velle. It's in the accusative infinitive construction, so we translate she thinks that the boy, subject of the clause, that the boy wants to sleep. If you were going to look this up in most dictionaries, the dictionary form of velle would be the first person singular present active indicative. So it would be, from vult would be volo, I want. So if you were going to look this up in most dictionaries, in our dictionary, it's listed in the dictionary, or in the index at the end of familia, it's listed as velle, because Orberg lists the infinitive first, but most of your college dictionaries will have the lexical form, the present active indicative first person singular. So you look this up under V-O-L-O, volo. And that is the end of the new features for chapter 13.